Tensions with Iran and the US are getting higher by the day, and believe it or not, Australia is more involved than we might think. On September 14, Saudi Arabia's oil facilities were hit by airstrike attacks. It was a devastating blow to Riyadh and helped drive world oil prices up by 10% 2 days later, the fastest rise in over a decade. Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthi rebels have claimed responsibility for the attacks, but the US and Saudi Arabia don't buy it, with both powers pointing the finger at Iran.
There is an enormous consensus in the region that we know precisely who conducted these attacks was Iran. I didn't hear anybody in the region who doubted that for a single moment.
Iran has repeatedly denied responsibility for the attacks, but President Trump says a retaliatory attack may be on the table, and he's also moving to increase sanctions. But these tensions with Iran are just the latest. They actually go way back before that. On June 20 this year, Iran shot down a US military surveillance drone. No one died, but they did destroy a pretty expensive piece of equipment. The US military responded targeting Iran with a cyber attack that disrupted Iran's missile program, and Donald Trump traded insults with Iranian officials over the events.
The drone was in international waters, clearly we have it all documented. It's documented scientifically, not just words. And they made a very bad mistake.
The White House actions mean it is mentally retarded.
But the feud between Iran and the US actually goes back years before that. So, by 2015, Iran had almost enough uranium to make a nuclear bomb. Uranium is like a substance that you can dig out of the ground and use to make nuclear fuel and power plants, or in high quantities to make a nuclear bomb. Iran had a lot of it. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean they were making a nuclear bomb, but they could have if they wanted to. But at the same time, Iran's economy was screwed thanks to international sanctions. So in July 2015, Iran and 6 major world powers signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which we all just call the Iran deal out of laziness. Under the deal, Iran agreed to scrap most of its uranium and its nuclear building facilities in exchange for those sanctions to be lifted so its economy could improve. Now, everything was smooth sailing. The sanctions came off and regular inspections didn't find any evidence of Iran breaking its agreement. Last May, Donald Trump withdrew from the deal and reimposed the sanctions, saying it was a horrible one-sided deal that gave too much to Iran.
They were in big, big trouble. They needed cash. We gave it to them.
The president imposed 2 rounds of sanctions on Iran, declared a powerful arm of Iran's military a terrorist organization, and threatened Iran on Twitter after a rocket landed near the US embassy in Baghdad. All this drone stuff is just the latest. Here's where things start to get scary. Iran just broke the 2015 deal for the first time since it came into effect. The deal limited Iran to a 300-kilo stockpile of uranium, and on June 27, Iran announced it had exceeded that amount. Now, experts say they'd need more than triple that to do any real damage, and Iran would take about a year to get to that point. But consider it this way. As of now, the countdown is on, and Iran has threatened other breaks in the deal too. The Iranian government has plans to increase the levels at which it enriches its uranium fuel and to build a nuclear reactor in its industrial capital. Now, maybe you're watching this all like, I'm an Aussie, it doesn't affect me. But if you drive a car, take public transport, have a job, or have any opinion one way or the other on the Australians getting involved in a massive global conflict, you're going to want to care. See, Australia and the US have long been good mates, and Scott Morrison has refused to rule out Australian involvement in a potential conflict, telling the ABC he will deal with any request from the US for military assistance seriously and on its merits. At the same time, Mike Pompeo, who's basically America's version of our foreign minister, has called on Australia to join the US in a global coalition against Iran. And here's the other thing about Iran. They control a pretty big chunk of the world's oil supply. If they threaten to disrupt that, Australia could be in major trouble. And I'm not just talking about high petrol prices. All this missile strike stuff is just the latest. Australia has a pretty crappy record when it comes to fuel reserves, and by that I mean the amount of oil we have on our shores that we can just dip into if the global oil supply faces disruptions. By international standards, we're supposed to be able to sustain ourselves for a minimum 90 days. But according to government figures, Australia has reserves of just 18 days of petrol, 22 days of diesel, and 23 days of jet fuel. If things get really bad, we could face our own oil crisis.